We'll talk about Bitachon and really just talk about a couple of sources and see where the Rambam and the Gra sort of take us, what path they lead us down. So getting right into it, there's a pasuk in Mishlei towards the beginning of Perek Gimel that says, Bitach el Hashem bechol libecha v'el binasecha al tisha'ein. So have bitachon, right, with all of your heart. And when it comes to your own, seichel, your own understanding, al tisha'ein, don't rely upon it. So this is where we're going to really sort of, I think we'll see where the Gra takes this, as he sort of takes this pasuk apart. But there's also a pasuk in Tehillim, Hashlech al Hashem yehavcha, v'hu yechalkelecha, right? So this is an interesting pasuk in that yehavcha is not a word that we typically see or use. The English translation is a burden, and we're going to see that there's some question about what does it mean? Where does that word come from, right? But really, it's the idea is place your burden or toss your burden onto Hashem, and He will sustain you. Lo yitin la'olam mot l'tzadik. He won't let the tzaddik collapse. So there's before we get into the Gra, and the Gra is actually going to quote from this Gemara in Megillah. So we'll just take a look at it first, and then we won't do a lot with it, but then we'll see how the Gra tries to understand it. So the Gemara in Megillah, Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, and actually before I start there, so I mentioned this in the email. So the two psukim that we have here, one from David Melech in Tehillim and one from Shlomo Melech in Mishlei. And they seem to really go hand in hand, at least as we'll see in a moment with the Gra. So the Gemara Megillah says, Lo havu yadi rabbanan my hashlech al Hashem yehavcha. The rabbanan they didn't know. Well, they seemed to be confused. What does this word yehavcha mean? So Amar Rabba Bar Chana zimna chada have azilna bahari hahu taya. He said one time, Rabbi Bar Chana says, one time I was going and there was this, Arab fella, called Darina Tuna, and I was carrying my load, my tuna. Well, Amar li shkol yehavcha. He said, give me your load, v'shari agam loy, and I will put it on my camel. So Rabbi Bar Chana says this. I learned what this word Yehavcha means from this fellow Bedouin or whatever he was. Okay, so let's get into the Gra, and on this I don't have English translation. The Bira Gra on Mishlei is not in Sefaria, so I had to copy and paste this from another source. Okay, so let's learn this out together. So, Bitach el Hashem bechol libecha, hainu. So, what does that mean? Sheyihye libecha shalem b'minas habitachon. Your heart should be full b'minas habitachon of faith. V'lo b'miktsas halev. And I think what he means is that bitachon is one of those things. It's not like a light switch that you sort of turn on and turn off. There's varying degrees, right? And so I think what the Gra is trying to tell us is that this is something that you want to try and continue down the path of growing and becoming more of a bal bitachon. The el binasecha al tisha'ein. So what does the second half, the seifa of the pasuk mean? Shelo tomar evtach b'Hashem achani mechuyev la'asos ulhisha'ein gam al sichlei. So he puts it together. He says, don't say that I am going to believe in Hashem, but I still have to rely upon my own, intellect. Ulachein, Amar sha'al tisha'ein. That's why it says, do not, sort of lean on it. Don't rely on it. Your own seichel. Afila b'toras mishenis, even sort of as like a cane that might just sort of help you a little bit. Lo sichlicha ella betach b'Hashem b'chol libecha. So he seems to be telling us that really what we want to strive for is that we become someone who has complete faith in Hashem. And it says, "V'zohu k'mo sheshamati mishmo." So remember that the Bir Gra was written by or compiled by his own Talmidim. So this is like an example of where we see the Talmidim saying, and by the way, I heard in the name of my teacher, the Gra, something similar. And he quotes this pasuk in Tehillim, "Hashlecha Hashem Yehavcha v'hu yichal kelecha v'lo yiten la'olam mot l'tzadik," and he quotes the Gemara in Megillah as well, just like we saw. So now the Gra continues and says, "Lo havi yadi rabbanan ma yehavcha ad azel Rabbi Bar Chana v'dari tuna v'havi azel achar hataya v'amarlei hataya shkol yovecha v'shadi agam loy." So that's that was the Gemara in Megillah, that it seems to indicate that the Rabbanan had no idea what this word meant until Rabbi Bar Chana comes along and says, I learned it from this fellow. So the Gra says, "V'hine iyevshar shelo have yadi rabbanan v'haotaya yada." I mean, we're talking about Chazal here. How do they not know what this word meant? But some random fellow on the street who's a schlepper, he seems to know what that word means. So acha'inin shahaya lahem safek b'midas bitachon. So the way that the Gra understands it is, it's not that they didn't understand the meaning of the word itself. It's that they were struggling, trying to understand what is the midah of bitachon, meaning what's the requirement here, and when we talk about bitachon. So im tzaricha adam la'asos b'sichlo v'yiftach b'shem Hashem sheyasa hatov be'inav o she'ein lihisha in klal al masav v'sichlo. So really, the way the Gra understands the Gemara Megillah is, that's the question they're asking themselves is, do we have to have complete faith in Hashem and that we don't rely upon our own intellect whatsoever? Or is there some, middle ground where we're actually, trying to muddle our way through it, but we also, in the back of our minds, we know that our HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to, has our backs, as it were, right? That we have bitachon in Hashem. And they say, "Shebevadei tzarich adam lasos b'sichlo v'lachzor achar davar tzarich ach yiftach gam b'shem Hashem." So he says, no, we know that you have to, we have to use our intellects. There's a reason why we're given our intellects. However, yiftach gam b'shem Hashem v'lechein kosher lehem milas yahavcha havedei lichtov tzirachecha. So it should have said that Hashem will, that sort of toss your needs on Hashem. Hashlech es tzrachecha al Hashem. Why does it say Yehavcha? So v'keven sharosh Rabbi Bar Chana have dari atuna v'hu hayat tzarich levakesh v'litin davar ma letaya sheyito hatuna al gmo v'lokein haya. So the Gra brings a very interesting distinction in this whole story with Rabbi Bar Chana. So the story goes that Rabbi Bar Chana is schlepping his own package, right? And this Taya is walking down the street and says, "Oh, why don't you just give it to me and I'll deal with it for you?" And the Gra's a little bit bothered by that. That's not generally how it works, right? The way it works is, if you need somebody to schlep something for you, you go and you hire them. They're not coming to you and offering their services, just come and throw it on my shoulder. So, Elishataya bikish mimenu, which is very strange, that this Taya is actually asking him, Rabbi Bar Chana, V'amarlei shkul ma she'ata tzarich litein li v'shadi agam loy. Hand it over to me and I'll put it on my camel. That's not the usual way of a Taya. So im kein afilu b'masha adam tzarich litin lechavero ba'ada davar im yeh min hashamayim oz chaver yivakesh mimenu sheyas elo. So he says that this is true by us as well. That what a person needs to give to his friend ba'ada davar for whatever purpose that someone is in need. If it's mina shemayim, as a chaver yavakesh mimenu sheyas elo, the person is going to request that it gets done. Ulechein shayach shaper milas Yehovcha Klomar. Af bedavar she'ata tzorich litein schar ba'ad zeh im yeh min hashamayim yivakshu mimecho la'asos lecho zos v'hovein. So the Gra seems to be indicating is that we learn something very, I think, fundamental about this from this language of Hashlich Hashem Yehovcha, that even when we aren't sort of ready for it, or when we are in need, but sometimes we don't realize it, or we're not even sure where to go, that the method of delivery, of deliverance for us will come to us. And that's the essence of Bitach El Hashem, as a Gra sort of connects the two psukim together, is that when we need whatever it is we need, sometimes we don't even realize it, the Taya will come, and in the case of this story, the Taya will come and say, hand it over to me, and I will take it off of your shoulder for you. And that's the reason why it's Yehavcha and not another language of Tzrachecha or something else in Tehillim. Does that make sense? All right. So that's the Gra, and how he understands this. There is, by the way, we'll see, I think we'll have a couple minutes at the end, and there's a famous mashal by the Dubin Magid on this pasuk in Tehillim. I've seen it a few different times in different places, so I'll share that with you. I think we'll have time, but let's go to the Rambam first, and then we can come back to that. So the Rambam, and this is a sort of an interesting set of halachos that he brings in, because he's not talking about necessarily about bitachon and other things in this Inyan, but he's talking about Hilchos Shmita of Yovel. So we're going to see two halachos in Perek Yud Gimel. This is towards the end of Hilchos Shmita and Yovel. Halachos Yud Beis and Yud Gimel. So Halacha Yud Beis gives us a little bit of an intro, and then in Pasuk Yud Gimel, it really ties into what we've just been talking about. So the Rambam says, "V'lama lo zachal Levi benachlas Eretz Yisrael u'bizasa im echa b'pnei shehuvda lavod es Hashem lashorso u'lahoros derachav hayashar mishpatov atzadikim l'rabim." So why doesn't Shevet Levi have an inheritance, have a chelik, land in Israel? It's as the other Shvatim do. It's because he was separated out. Shevet Levi was separated out for the avoda, right, to serve Hashem, and also to teach lahoros derachav. So the Shevet Levi is the Kohanim, the Levim, and they're also ones who are also teaching Torah, and who are the ones who sort of exemplify what it means around avodas Hashem. Shnamar yoru mishpatecha Yaakov v'sarasecha l'Yisrael lefichach huvdelu midarchei ha'olam. Therefore, they're separated out from darchei olam, I think, meaning like having to go get a parnasa, or lo orchim milchama, they don't have to go to war. Kishar Yisrael v'lo nachlin v'lo zochin la'atzmem b'koch gufan. They're not using their the strength of their bodies. They're not farming, they're not tilling the land, etc. Ella him chel Hashem. They're really they are the army of Hashem. Shnamar barech Hashem chelo v'hu baruchu zocha lahem shnamar ani chelkecha v'nachalasecha. So that's Shevet Levi in a nutshell, at least during the times when we had a Beis Hamikdash. Now, here's where the Rambam says something very interesting. The next halacha, V'lo Shevet Levi bilvad, ella kol ish v'ish mikol boy ha'olam. And any person who's coming up, asher nadva rucho oso vehevino Mado libodo la'amod lifnei Hashem l'shorso la'ovdo l'deis Hashem v'halach yashar k'mosha asahu alokim pork miat savro al ha'chashbonus harabim. So pause there for a moment. So the Rambam in a lot of language is saying that anybody who sort of makes this decision for himself, that he wants to separate himself, stand before Hashem to serve and to learn and to understand Hashem, and to go in the straight ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he can sort of remove the yoke from his shoulders of all the different cheshbonos harabim, the things that we have to deal with on an everyday basis of making a living and doing all the things that we have to do. Asher bikshu b'nei hadam harei zed niskadish kodesh kadoshim. This, you can separate yourself and really be kodesh kadoshim. Yeh Hashem chelko v'nachalaso le'olam u'le'olei olamim, and this would be for eternity, even in Piska lo b'olam hazeh davar hamaspik lo k'moshe zacha lekohanim la'levim. So, and you can sort of, you can't serve in the base of Mikdash. You cannot be a Levi. That's not what what the Rambam is saying. But you can decide that, you know what, I want a life of just Torah and mitzvos, and that's it. So Hari David alav Hashem Omer Hashem minas chelki v'kosi ata tomich gorali. This, by the way, this pasuk in Tehillim is where that line in Adon Olam comes from, right? Where we say minas kosi b'yom ekra, that Hashem is, is my chelik and my cup, as it were. It comes from this pasuk in Tehillim from David Melech again. So the Rambam seems to be indicating that, and I think this is what the Gra was also going towards, was that Bitachon is not, it's a scale. It's not a on and off switch. And what the Rambam is showing us is that it's up to you. You can sort of take this to the nth degree and really set yourself apart, if that's what you so choose. And I don't think he's trying to say that, you'll live the life of luxury, that sort of thing. I mean, but that's that is a decision that each one of us can make. And again, interesting that it's coming from Hilchos Shemitah V'Yovel. So, just to wrap up this idea, I wanted to just share with you that story from the Dubno Magid. So the Dubno Magid talks about, and this is really from that pasuk in Tehillim of Hashlech al Hashem Yahavacha. So the Dubno Magid says, how do we understand the message of this pasuk Hashlech al Hashem? It's interesting, like toss upon, like throw your burden, onto Hashem. And so he said he said the mashal is that there was a certain old man who was walking down the street. He was carrying, a heavy backpack or, a big bag or something like that over his shoulder. And he's schlepping it for miles and miles. And finally, a wagon driver pulls up from behind him and says to him, hey, where are you going? It looks like you're struggling with that. The old man tells him, and he says, you know what? I'm going that same direction. Why don't you hop into the back of my wagon? And the old man thanks him and says, great, jumps into the wagon, and they start going down the road. And pretty soon, a little bit ways down the road, the wagon driver is looking around and glances back behind him and notices that the old man still has that big bag over his shoulder. Like he's still carrying it, even though he's in the wagon. And the wagon driver looks at him and he says, why are you doing that? Why don't you put your burden down on the wagon? You don't have to carry it. And the old man says to him, he says, it's enough that you are carrying me from point A to point B, but I'm going to carry my own load. And the wagon driver looks at him and says, you fool, what are you talking about? Either way, I'm schlepping all your weight. Whether you put it on your shoulder or not, my horse is still schlepping your weight and the weight of your bag, right? So what are you talking about? And he says the nimshal, that's the story, that's the mashal. And the nimshal, according to the Dubno Magid, is that's sometimes how we are. That sometimes we have our own burden, and here HaKadosh Baruch Hu is helping us along the way, and we don't realize it. We don't realize that really we could actually relax our bodies, relax our arms a little bit, and understand that, as we're being carried down the path in life, that's actually HaKadosh Baruch Hu carrying us down, and we can sort of relax and acknowledge, what's really going on. So that was our little introduction into Bitachon. Any questions, any thoughts?